I am here with the great Brian Dye, pastor of the Legacy. Are you Bishop, Pope?
Dhati, shut up.
I'm just like, I'm always, you have been.
I'm in your shadow.
I'm definitely in yours. You have been, but seriously, you have been a blessing. I just remember a long time ago, just hearing about Brian Dye. It was you were the only other person, and every time I talked about like people living in our house and all that, you would always be like, hey, Brian Dye, and so this has always been a privilege. I did officially beat you to the first book. We had I remember those competitions. It was just like, who's going to be the first person to write a book?
You did, man.
Yeah, I got it out there.
Not even close.
No, but Brian, I really do appreciate you getting a chance to talk. Very similar to kind of what I was doing before when I did like a 21 days of reflection. I'm just trying to connect with some thought leaders on some of the issues that are going on. Your heart has always been about discipleship. My heart has always been about discipleship. And part of that passion for discipleship is one of the things I'm realizing more and more and more. I've always known it, but I'm saying like we need to be a lot more explicit. Has been that if we're going to make disciples in North America, we have to address the issue of race. And because of the political climate that's going on ever since 2012. Even beyond what exposed, like with Trayvon Martin, down to Trump, President Trump, and kind of the political environment that's going on, the divide between Republican, Democrat, rich, poor, whatever it is that there just seems, and a lot of that is kind of pressed into kind of black and white. 2 decades ago, you saw a lot, with the advent of kind of parachurch ministries and things coming in and their focus on minorities. You saw this kind of mass exodus of minorities out of the black church. And then now, according to New York Times, the quiet exodus that they just came out with an article, and the divorce from white evangelicalism, it seems like there's now a mass exodus of minorities out of white evangelical spaces. The problem is, and this, I don't have any statistical data, but just kind of seeing anecdotally, I've seen they're not necessarily going to any church now. I just really want to just kind of talk to you about that. This our passions to make disciples in North America, in our cities, you in Chicago, me in Atlanta, the issue of race, the tension, these are things that are affecting our congregations, and so just really want to see kind of what have been just generally your thoughts, about kind of what's been going on, and and then how have you dealt with it?
Yeah, obviously, as you mentioned, since really Trayvon, it's been a rough number of years, right? I think the thought was always if there was videotape, if there was evidence, people would finally be convicted. Yeah. And obviously there was no video for Trayvon, but many cases after that, right, where a police officer is shooting someone in the back. A police officer shoots, Laquan McDonald walking away, 16 times. And just that there's still no justice in 99% of these cases. Definitely is frustrating, it's hurting, hurtful. And so I think we have a lot of people who are reeling in this hurt, and so you've been hurt by the justice system, which maybe could even be understandable. But then when Trump seems to kind of run on a campaign that goes against kind of the push for a lot of justice issues that have been raised in the last few years, and you see the stats that what was it, 82% of quote unquote evangelical Christians voted for Trump. That I think was just like the last dagger, the straw that broke the camel's back, right? Yeah. So it's not just America, it's not just our justice system letting us down. It's the evangelical church, and that's such a, I don't even know how you define that term, evangelical church. Who's evangelical? Who's just Christian?
Yeah, people don't even want to call themselves evangelical now. Yeah. Like it's interesting because as we've been even in our history, it's about Reformed and all that, and now I talk to people, cats don't even want to be considered Reformed anymore. Yeah. And so this, what? Yeah. These titles, and I've never really been about titles and labeling and those types of things, but it just really seems, that this has caused a greater division and even a disassociation of whether it be you know, I'm in the Southern Baptist Convention,
Yeah.
kind of a divorce from anything that has the stench or the scent of kind of white evangelicals.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm not totally against, like, if we don't want to be called evangelical or reformed or whatever title we've used, because, again, none of those titles are found in scriptures, right? Even Christian was a term that was given by the unbelievers to the Christians, you know, when they saw that they looked like Christ, right? So I'm not so concerned with what title people want to use, or even what church they want to associate themselves with necessarily, as long as it's a Christ-exalting church. But what I sense is just a general discontentment that is that's having a hard time settling down, right? And so there's a crowd, right, that left the black church, you know, whether 10, 15 years ago, whatever, because there was discontentment there, and then comes into the white church thinking that the white church is going to be kind of the fix-it, you know, and then seeing issues there, right, and now going to whatever it is, secularism or no church or whatever it is that they're running into. I think until people settle down and become content in who we are in Christ, our identity in Him, and what mission He has given us, and not taking that from other people, right? They're going to continue to bounce every 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's just going to lead to constant depression and constant isolation. And you're going to realize that you're all alone and there's nobody with you because you kept, you know, bouncing ships, right? Yeah. And so eventually we have to, wherever we land, we have to become content there and settle there, right? And so whether it's in the white church, the black church, the multicultural church, you know, again, we have to make ourselves home and say, you know what, there's flaws here because there's flaws in my own heart. Yeah. Amen. But I'm gonna love this family just like I love my own family. My crazy uncle who comes to the family reunion drunk every year, right, and whatnot. Like I love them because we're blood, right? And so with the church, like, are we gonna love each other no matter what the issues are, and fight through that, you know, to grow through that? Because if there's any hope in our divided country, it has to be the people of God, you know, who don't separate over political ideals, over social ideas, right? But who say, no, let's get in the room, let's close the door. Let's hash this out. Let's yell at each other. Let's fight. You know, but when we come out of this room, right, we're brothers and sisters, right, and we're committed to this cause together. And so I think in discipleship, it's really helping people to learn how to process those, right, and how to realize, first of all, when Jesus said, you know, when you see something in your brother, right, first take out the log out of your own eye, so that you can see clearly, take the speck out of your brother's eye, right? So two things in there. One is we should always start internally. We should always look at our own hearts, because if we're honest with ourselves, we're all screwed up, we're all messed up. We're all self-centered, you know, people. And so start with our own hearts, right? But then with that clarity of our own lives, and then we come to our brother or our sister whom we have differences with, whom we see flaws in, right? And we realize that their issue is minute in relation to my issue, right? I think that's why Paul could say at the end of his life, I'm the worst of all sinners, right? Not that he literally was the worst of all sinners, but he realized the depths of his own heart in a way that nobody else could understand, right?
So does that keep you from, because a lot of times people will say that, you know, that will keep you from even having those hard conversations or even challenging, you know, people, because the depths of your own heart and the perspective of kind of the log that's in your own eyes is like, I can't really speak to anything. So how do you balance with that tension?
Yeah, I think what Jesus said is first take out the log out of your own eye, right? Like we can't just become apathetic to our own sin and the sin of others, right? And then we're just going to be running around in our sin, and everyone's going to be running around their sin, right? And so we have to take the time to do the surgery in our own heart, right? Through the gospel of Christ. and then take the time, even though it's annoying, even though we've had this conversation over and over and over again, right? Being willing to continue to go back and have that conversation, right? In the same way that we do with our wives or husbands or children, right? You know, I was just reading in the Gospels yesterday, just how many times am I supposed to forgive, right? And it's like 70 times 7, right? You keep forgiving, right? Because that's what family does, right?
Yeah.
And so if we continue to stay in our own camps, if we continue to stay isolated, then there's no hope, right?
Yeah.
But again, solutions happen because people work at it. We're here honoring Dr. King's 50th year since his murder.
Yeah.
You know, he gave his life up for the cause. It would have been easy for him just to take a pastoral job, just to preach, you know, quote unquote, the gospel, the Bible, right? What people want to hear, what people like to hear, and stay there. He would most likely still be alive today, you know, and be in a lot better position, you know, in many ways. But he went across the aisle, right? Within the black church, right? Pushing people who were comfortable with just the status quo to step outside that, but then also the white church, right? And he was working to bridge the gap, even though, again, in Harlem he was stabbed, in Chicago he was bricked, right? His house was firebombed. Right. I mean, he was willing to do that, and yet he still did it with a love, right, that sought the reconciliation.
Do you, you know, I'm going to say this tongue in cheek, but I mean, do you feel like we have any, like, Martin Luther Kings? And let me kind of qualify that. What I mean by that is, we celebrate him, we honor him now because he's dead, he's passed, he's assassinated.
He's a silent prophet.
Yeah, he's a silent. And I thought Russ Moore did a great job at just kind of talking about that. But one of the things that I wrestle with is, a lot of times people will ask, will you die for me? Or will you die for the cause? But the question is, would you live for it, right? Will the idea of a living sacrifice, would you continually die many deaths in order to do that? And you've been a picture of that. You've been a model of that. Being in Chicago, being in the Garfield community, in the Garfield community, how has that been? Especially has there been any difference being a white man in a predominantly all black neighborhood, wrestling and trying to make disciples in that context? Has there been shifts? Is it any different today than it was 10 years ago? What shifts have you? Where are you encouraged? Where are you discouraged around just that tension?
Well, it's, you know, when I look at my life, you know, I feel like I'm a bit of an anomaly in the sense that, you know, my father's white, my mom is Puerto Rican. I grew up in a Puerto Rican and African American community. I was called a white boy growing up, right? So I was an outsider in many ways, you know, I went away to a predominantly white Christian college in my first experience with white majority culture, right? And so even to this day, you know, I don't fully belong in any circle in my mind, right? I don't fully understand the white experience. I don't fully understand the black experience. I don't fully understand the Puerto Rican experience, right? I understand glimpses into each of them. And so as a result, I mean, I think God has made me a bit of a bridge builder in the sense that I understand in part of these different cultures. And so I'm able to kind of help, you know, facilitate some relationships. But at the same time, again, you know, my wife and I moved really because the cost of living as the neighborhood that I grew up in was gentrified. Moved into an all African American community, you know, 14 years ago. Because again, this is where we could afford to live in the city of Chicago. And even though I had a lot of experiences in that culture, again, my skin is white. I'm a white guy, and so I always have to wrestle through that, you know, every single day, understanding that, again, because of the history of our country, right? There's a lot of hurt that's been caused by white people, and particularly white men, right? And I can't fully be upset about that, right? I have to understand again that that's kind of the context, and so it's helped me in many ways to again just be a continued learner and gatherer, and so forth. But in the question, do I see it any better? Man, maybe baby steps better, Maybe we've moved a few inches. What I do see, again, since in the last few years in kind of the racial tension, it's brought to light, I think, a lot of stuff that's been swept under the rug. Stuff that in the minority community it's never been swept under the rug, right? It's always been, the reality, right? The police are crooked and politicians are crooked, so forth, and justice system is broken, for the poor and so forth.
You talked about the idea of being in this kind of context. You've been a learner and a gatherer, but you've also, and many people have seen you as a leader. How has that been, leading cross-culturally, cross-ethnically, in many ways? I'm pretty sure many times you've probably heard, you don't get us. I don't know how much, if you have or whatever, and even speaking to that, understanding the sensitivities and those things. How do you kind of challenge an African American, where they want to hide it under the idea of this is cultural, Brian, you just don't get, this is cultural, this is just the way we do it, How do we do that? Because and again, not asking you to answer this for all white people, but there is that tension a lot of times, and I hear that often. Then we want to hide culturally, and I tell people all the time, homogeneous cultures hide homogeneous sins. And there's a benefit of being exposed to multiple different cultures and allowing people to speak in. So, but how do you specifically address that, or wrestle with that tension as a leader?
Yeah, I think, pastoring, you counsel couples, right? And you realize the two shall become one is not instantaneous activity that happens when two people say I do, right? It's a continuous act where you become in one flesh, right? And you realize, man, they're a morning person, I'm a night person, right? They want to talk to me early in the morning. I'm like, yo, be quiet already, right? We have to learn each other, and we have to appreciate the beauty of the other, right? So my wife is an extreme extrovert, I'm an extreme introvert, when we first got married. And in the 17 years of our marriage, we've both come a little more to the middle, right? Because what's happened is I've learned the beauty of her extroversion, and she's learned the beauty of my introversion, right? Neither one is right or wrong, right? Extroverts are great in starting up conversations and engaging people in a way introverts don't, right? But at the same time, introverts, there's beauty in quiet and stillness, right? And listening and observing and so forth, right? And so it's as we realize that not that the other is weird, that the other is different, but the other is beautiful. That we've again appreciated the other person in a deeper, more beautiful way, right? And so in the same way, like God from creation said, I want you guys to spread across the earth, right? The Tower of Babel, right, were people who say, no, we don't want to be different. We all want to be the same, right? We want one city. We want one building that rises to the skies and one language and so forth. And God didn't want that, right? So he separated the languages and caused them to spread throughout the earth, right? There's beauty in God's design of difference, right? Different language, different food. Like, Thanksgiving at our house, like I want some rice con condules, right? I want some macaroni, and my wife makes some green bean casserole, and it's like there's beauty in all of that, right? There's stuff to enjoy in all of it. And so it's really learning, again, the beauty and difference, right? And helping people to see that. Their worship style is different, their preaching style is different, but there's beauty in it, right? On both sides, right?
So the question is, there's beauty in it, but there's also some ugly parts. A lot of times. Definitely. So like when a foreigner comes in, they see the materialism in America, right? I mean, it's something that we don't really address, we don't speak to very, but they see it, right? You know, because it's something that we're kind of, our senses are dull to. It's just part of the American church, right? We need to have big, better, we need fancy mics to do, you know, all those things to do what we do. So it's just like in the last minute, so like, how do we speak to the hard areas that we want to put on culture? You know, when we're talking about cross-cultural, the hard issues, you know, that we're just like, no, that's not cultural, that's sin.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, is it, and you know, and obviously you don't, I mean, there's so many different things that we can address, but it's just like, what have you done? Is it just build relationship? Is it like, what is it? What have you done in order to speak to hard issues that people have categorized as cultural, but no, you just address, no, that's sin, right? And so we want to dignify and, you know, obviously recognize and affirm the dignity, but there are certain things that are just sinful. And how, as you, as a leader, do you address those sinful issues that are clearly sin, but we have hidden as cultural?
It has to happen through relationship, right? You can't just continuously speak against stuff without the relationship as a parent, right? You understand that, and so you earn the trust to be able to speak, right? But that doesn't mean, again, we don't speak, right? So sin needs to be called sin, a spade needs to be called a spade, right? And so, but again, what often happens in our dialogue, in our communication across the aisle, is there's no relationship that happens. There's no sitting down at a table. There's no being in each other's homes, right? And so it always comes across as you just saying, what's wrong with me, right?
And I think that's kind of the tension. Like, if we're dealing with systemic issues, we're dealing with, you know, like even at an event like this, there's not a lot of relationships that are built. It's just people talking across the table. And so, like, how do we do it on a corporate? Because if it's all about relations, that just deals with the interpersonal stuff. But what about the systemic stuff? You know, so that's kind of that's more of my wrestle than to figure like we have a solution for that. But that is some of the tension that I feel like that we're wrestling with this race conversation. You know, as in a denomination like me that I'm in is SBC. We're talking about systemic issues that have been from. I mean, it was birthed on slavery. You know, and it was on the wrong side of civil rights, the wrong side of many different things. But the question is that these are systemic issues that don't have a face, because the people who are now representing Southern Baptists, they're like, we weren't there doing things. We don't, you know, but there's still systemic issues that we're addressing. So it's kind of like, how do we deal with systemic issues on a personal and relational basis? You know, and so I don't know. I mean, that's all the time I got. But I mean, let's maybe we can pick this conversation back up at another time. But I mean, I really do appreciate your time. I really do admire what you're doing and your work. You know, so man, thank you for what you're doing. Keep grinding. You know, keep allowing the Lord to use you.
Appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you, brother.